Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for helping this channel grow to 1,000 subscribers. I've said this many times, but I really appreciate it. And one of the ways I wanted to show that appreciation is to do a different type of video than I normally do from the traditional essay style stuff with Code Geass. And that is to answer a question I've gotten in my live stream or in comments. How'd you get into anime, Code Geass, why Code Geass? And I figured this would be the perfect time to do that. Now, if you like these type of videos, I can make some more in the future. For more milestones that I reach, almost like an incentive for you to keep subscribing because you'll get videos about my life, more anime story stuff just like this. So let's talk about how I actually got into anime. So when I was growing up, I didn't have cable, which means the only channels I could watch of television for anime was Kids WB and Fox Kids. And on those two channels, the shows I watched were Monster Rancher, Mega Man NT, Battle Network, Escaflowne, Sailor Moon, Pokemon, and of course Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Which to this day, Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Have still had a strong impact on my life. So even though they were not like the big stuff on, say, Toonami, like Cowboy Bebop, for example, these shows were a big impact on my life. And I know from how YouTube has, how it's gone over the years with certain channels, and that stuff will never go away. Now, even though I was aware of other shows like Naruto and Dragon Ball Z, I never really got a chance to watch any of them because, again, I didn't have cable. I didn't get internet in our house until I think I was a sophomore in high school, and even then I didn't really know how to find certain stuff. So it wasn't until much later in my life that I actually learned about where to watch anime, which anime to watch. Now, I will say that I did watch certain shows when I was either at my grandparents' house or in motels during many of my family's road trips. And the reason why is because it had cable. So I'll give you an example of a show that I watched at a motel, and that was Dragon Ball Z. In fact, it was the first episode I ever watched, period. And that was the one where Goku just finished his fight with Cell, and he surrenders to let Gohan fight him instead. He basically substitutes him out. I don't remember exactly all the elements of that episode when I first watched it, but that was the first time I watched any anime on cable television. So that was kind of cool. Before I move on to how I got into Bleach and Code Geass and all that stuff, I want to share one quick story about Digimon in particular that I always think about every now and then because of how weird or kind of silly it was. So in Digimon Series 1, and if you haven't watched the show, this is going to be a bit of a spoiler, but the show is really old and I'm sure you don't care or have already seen it. Anywho, at the end of the Series 1, the Digidestins were fighting against the Dark Masters. That was Piedmon, Puppetmon, Machinedramon, and Metal Seedramon. And when they defeated all of them, they had to fight Apocalypmon. And when they fought Apocalypmon, I wasn't able to watch it when it aired at the time. So I remember convincing my father to record it. I remember telling him this, and I'm not lying, this is what I told him. I said, "Dad, you have to record this episode because they're never going to air this again. This is the only time I will ever be able to watch this." Now, thinking back on it, it was kind of silly because Digimon is not only available to stream on Hulu, but even way before, they obviously re-aired it many times on Fox Kids. It was on other cable networks, and of course you have DVDs and VHS. So after high school, I studied abroad for a year. Doesn't really matter where the location is in terms for this conversation, but I could always talk about it in our video if you guys are interested. Anywho, the building didn't have Wi-Fi at the time, so the only way we could actually use the computers was the computer lab, which is something I was used to also when I was in high school. We had a library, had the computers in that room as well. Anywho, I one time went into the lab, well not one time, but this one time I went into the lab, more accurate to say. There was someone in there who was watching anime. There were actually several people. One guy was watching Death Note. I don't remember what the episode was. I remember seeing Light talking to Ryuk, which is like every episode of Death Note ever, so that could be anything. But then after I, glanced at the screen and moved away, I saw another one of my friends who was sitting on the floor watching something on his laptop, and I figured, hey, I'll join him. I remember one time before he watched Naruto, and I figured, oh, that's kind of cool. At the time, I was ragging on the show because I said the animation was terrible, basically because I didn't like the way Rock Lee looked, and so I figured the whole show was like that crappy. I was, of course, wrong, and we'll get to that later. But in this context, I watched and previously watched Naruto. So this time, I sat down to watch something a little different. And the scene was a guy with a cloak on, a white cloak, with nice black hair. He has hair. I don't anymore. It is what it is. And he slashed a woman in white, clear cut, and I thought she was dead. She wasn't, though. Spoiler alert. I guess. That character was Byakuya Kuchiki, and the woman was Shirayuki, the Zanpakuto spirit of Rukia Kuchiki, his sister. And that was my first introduction into Bleach, which ended up becoming like the biggest thing in my life at the time. So after I watched that episode, I started watching the show in the computer lab every day, which was so much fun. Eventually, we did get Wi-Fi, and I went into my bedroom with one of my friend's laptops. I think it was just one laptop, actually. And I was watching it till 1 in the morning every day. 1 in the morning is not an obscure number. It happened to be the time when the Wi-Fi was turned off. Whole nother topic. Anyways, so I'm watching Bleach every night till 1 in the morning. I'm going through the original first season, second season. I watched the Bound arc. Some people said I could skip it, but I did because I thought it was interesting. I know it's filler, but, unpopular opinion, I actually enjoyed it. Now, one thing interesting about watching Bleach specifically, it was the first time I ever considered watching a show in Japanese using English subtitles, because prior to this I only watched stuff on Kids IB and Fox Kids, which were dubbed, obviously, and Bleach for the most part was as well. So I never watched a show sub before, and I had to because at the time Bleach was only dubbed till the fight between Ichigo and Grimmjow, so I had to watch it in subtitles, and that was fine. It was different, I guess. I skipped the Omega arc, which, by the way, I watched it recently, and is it the best thing ever? No, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more. I think the problem with Bleach, and this could be a lot of our shows as well, when you're deep into the show and you want to see a conclusion of certain arcs, when you have to stop for a filler arc, it pisses you off, obviously. But when the show is already done, it's completed, and you jump back onto it, and you watch these filler arcs, they're actually very enjoyable. And I can always talk about in the future why I personally enjoy filler arcs, and why I think they have more value than simply letting the manga catch up to the anime. Or rather, the anime lets the manga get ahead far enough so they can, make more episodes. Okay, so watching it sub, I got all the way to the most of the Zanpakuto Unknown Tales filler arc, which was fine, but then I'm thinking, okay, so now what do I do? I watched as much as I could dubbed, I watched as much as I could subbed. So now I'm like, okay, apparently there was a manga for this. Again, I'm very new to this stuff, so be patient. And so I read the manga for Bleach, and I caught up that way. And I was impatiently waiting for the anime to animate these episodes. And I wasn't the only person, by the way. There were videos on YouTube. I can't find them to this day, but I'm sure if anyone was waiting for Bleach like I was at the time, you can probably also recall that there were people who animated the manga parts of it. Like there was the Vastalorda fight between Ichigo and Yukiura, and Soifon versus Batagon. Those were two examples I remember specifically watching someone animate them. And they were really well done too. Because when I watched the actual show when it came out, or when that arc came out, it was pretty close. So that was kind of cool. One thing I want to point out before I continue with this is that when I was sitting in my bed watching Bleach every day till 1 in the morning, that was probably one of the better moments of my life, period. Because I was studying abroad for a year, so I wasn't at school, and I wasn't working. There were really no real responsibilities in my life. That was the only time where I had no real responsibilities. Basically, when we take a gap year. And so, for me, that was like my rosebud. If you don't get the reference, basically in the film Citizens Kane, which is a big spoiler, but the film is really old, and I'm sure if you've seen it, you know this already. If you don't, I apologize. Spoiler alerts for Citizen Kane. Anywho, for those who don't know or don't care, basically, the film starts with him dying, and he says the words, Rosebud. And everyone's trying to figure out what that means. Well, at the end of the film, they don't discover it, but you, the audience, do. There's a sled that says Rosebud on it that's thrown into a furnace. The significance of the sled is that Kane was actually using it as a child before he was taken away and starting his life as becoming a rich, successful business tycoon. But to him, the most important part of his life was when he was sledding in the snow. That's all he really cared about at the end of the day. So for me, my rosebud was sitting in bed watching Bleach for hours, specifically Bleach because of the anime, but really anything. It was just a fun time to do that. And even now, I will never have that opportunity again. It's something that's very dear to my heart, and why Bleach specifically, but the whole period of time was so important to me. Now, I was obsessed with Bleach, and I could talk about that in another video, but to give you an example, I even cosplay as a Soul Reaper. I made the costume myself. It was kind of cool. I got a nice little cloak, which came from a Scream costume, minus the mask, obviously. And I also made like the sword out of I think it was cardboard and a broomstick. I'll have a photo if you guys are interested in that. So finally, the last arc, not the last arc, but the fake Katakura Town arc conclusion finally came out, and I was so excited. I watched it with my friend. We sat on the floor watching the intro for the first time, and I couldn't stop fangirling, even though I'm a grown man, but I just couldn't help it because I was so excited. And that's why my two favorite intros in Bleach are Change and the second intro, which I forgot the name of it. But the second one's kind of nostalgia, sitting in bed watching Bleach for hours until 1 in the morning. And that one, and Change, because I was waiting so long for that animation, for that arc, and it was so gratifying to see it. And that's why that intro was so important to me. Anywho, I know I said anywho like a bunch of times in the video, but again, not scripted, just a simple conversation with you guys. Anyhow, I finished that show, Bleach, and I came back home after staying abroad for a year, and I started taking to what I learned to watch more shows. That includes things like Naruto. I watched Dragon Ball Z my first year at community college, which was great. I think Naruto shortly after that. On the Xbox Live, we had we subscribed to the Xbox Live service, and there was the Gold, obviously. And I had this thing called Manga Reader. I don't think it exists anymore. But when it did exist, I watched shows like Madoka Magica. I watched Monster. I took out stuff in the library to watch GTO and Blood Plus, and of course, Code Geass and Death Note. Now, I believe I watched those shows online, but I really don't remember. It's been a long time. That was like 10 years ago. It's kind of crazy that I think about it that way, but it's been like 10 years since I watched both shows. So I know people were comparing Code Geass to Death Note quite often when the shows came out. I don't remember if I did or not. I will, of course, tell you guys that I preferred Code Geass over Death Note, specifically because the ending of Death Note pissed me off. And there were other elements, too, that I didn't like. I will say, though, since rewatching Death Note and reading the manga, which I didn't do originally, I have a more appreciation for the show and the story, but there are definitely certain parts I still don't like too much. And I'll one day discuss it in the video. Code Geass, and this is like the point of this video, like, why do you talk about Code Geass? What's so great about it? Well, for one thing, people love it, so obviously it's good for views, and I only care about views and money. No, I'm just kidding. The reason why I like Code Geass and why I talk about it is because the show had a huge impact on me. It's been 10 years since I watched the show originally, and I've watched it maybe once or twice since, and every time I've watched it, there's always been certain parts that kind of stuck in my mind. Even after the first watch, I'll give you an example. The Special Administrative Zone in Japan, the whole massacre of Euphemia, the way Lelouch handled Shirley, right? That scene when Colin rescues Lelouch and turned 18, the Battle of Tokyo 2, and of course the Zero Requiem. In fact, the Zero Requiem, I thought about that whole ordeal for weeks and months. I still think about it, every now and then, but at the time, it was just a crazy ending, and it always stuck with me. There's a song written by Coldplay called Viva La Vida, and someone made an AMV called Requiem for the Emperor. And in that AMV, it's basically a tribute to the Zero Requiem. It's one of the best AMVs ever made, and one of the best Code Geass AMVs ever made. I highly recommend it to anyone. I will probably link it in the description below if I remember. So I talk about Code Geass because it was a very impactful anime in my life. It wasn't the only, of course. There was, obviously I mentioned Bleach. Monster was a big one too, and I have a lot of things to say about Monster. One day I'll do more videos, or do any videos on Monster rather, because I really enjoyed it. I know it's not as popular as Code Geass or other shows, but man, Monster was so good. And Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood was the last of those three big shows. People often ask me what my top anime of all time, and I've always stated that it's Bleach. No, it's Monster, Bleach, and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Really, any order you want there, and then Code Geass obviously is in the top 10. Not top 4, though. There's a reason for that. Not for this video. So the point I'm trying to make is that Code Geass was a very impactful anime. I love talking about it and shows in that same period of time. This whole channel was devoted to shows that made a big impact on me. I do watch new shows, of course, and I watch older shows, but these particular shows had a huge impact on my life, and more importantly, people loved hearing and talking about it years after they came out, which is a testament to how good they are. And that's how I got into anime. That's the whole story behind it. Why I talk about Code Geass, because again, it's such a great show. And there's so many deeper elements to it. I hope I've discussed that in many of my videos on the series, and why I want to talk about Monster at some point, Bleach, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and now I'm talking about Death Note, unironically, I should say. And that's kind of, that's where we're going. And I hope you guys continue watching the content. If you guys like more of this free-form like videos where I just kind of go off and discuss topics, let me know, because these are fun to do, and they're easier to make than the long essay videos. But I still enjoy those, labor of love, all this stuff. So that's the end of this video here. I really appreciate all the support, and I hope you guys watch more videos in the future. And I'm going to end with the quote I always end with, which is, "The world is not a dark place, and tomorrow is going to be a good day." And that's one of the reasons why I've loved Monster for years, is because even in that show, a very dark, depressing situation for Tenma and the people around him, he still maintains this positive outlook on life, and that positive outlook affects everyone around him. And I hope I do the same thing for you guys when it's not so great in life. I mean, things keep happening. Last year was awful for so many reasons. I don't even want to go into that. Even more personal stuff, whatever it is. Just remember, guys, it will be a good day. Stay positive, and thanks for watching.